Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My journey started in college where I studied graphic design, mostly creating logos and posters for student organizations. After graduating, I freelanced for a while, but the real turning point came during the Facebook t-shirt boom around 2018. You know those oddly specific shirts that say things like, "Never underestimate a guitar playing grandma born in March"? Yeah, those were everywhere. I noticed many sellers needed designs fast, and that's when I had my light bulb moment. Instead of being just another freelancer, I could build an agency connecting sellers with designers. Within 6 months, I had a solid reputation and a database of over 50 talented designers I could call upon for projects. That's when he showed up. This seller was moving serious volume, like thousands of shirts per design. His first message seemed promising. He reached out saying he'd seen our agency's work and mentioned he was selling around 3,000 shirts per design. He said he needed someone reliable and wanted to discuss rates. I responded with our standard rate of $100 per design, with payment required upfront. He tried to negotiate, pointing out his huge sales numbers, and suggested $500 for 5 designs, but with payment after delivery. He told me to check his seller profile as proof that he was legitimate. I should have stuck to my guns about the upfront payment, but his numbers were impressive. We agreed and my team delivered 5 solid designs. Then came the ghosting. No responses to emails, messages, or calls. I was out $500, which might not sound like much, but for a small agency, every dollar counts. I was ready to write it off as a costly lesson when a week later, I got an email. This genius had copied me, along with several other designers, in a mass recruitment email. What he didn't know was that I recognized 3 of those designers from my database of potential hires. Through my still active access to his shared Dropbox folder, he never revoked it. I watched as he hired those 3 designers. That's when I hatched my plan. I waited a week, then sent each designer an email. I complimented their work and told them we were looking for designers. I mentioned we were offering $150 per design with consistent work and asked if they were interested. All 3 jumped ship within days. The seller was suddenly desperate with no designers and orders to fulfill. Right on cue, I got another email. He acknowledged our previous payment issues but explained he really needed designs. He offered to pay the $500 he owed me upfront this time. I agreed but added the condition. I wanted 10% commission on any shirt that sells over 1,000 units. He agreed immediately. Now here's where it gets interesting. I started incorporating copyrighted vectors into the designs, but before sending them to him, I'd upload them to Teespring myself. The commission clause let me track which designs were selling well. Once I identified the winning designs, I reached out to the original artists whose work I'd used. I explained that someone was profiting from their copyrighted work and offered to help them claim those profits in exchange for 20% of the recovered amount. The artists were furious and agreed immediately. We reported every infringing design to Teespring, showing proof of copyright ownership and pointing to my earlier uploads as evidence of the timeline. Teespring's investigation was thorough, and they sided with us completely. The results were beautiful. Teespring refunded all profits to the original artists. We're talking about $50,000 worth of sales. My cut was $10,000. But the real satisfaction came from what happened next. I posted detailed reports about his scam on every major design forum, Facebook group, and scam reporting website I could find. He tried starting up again under a different name, but designers would Google his email address and find my warnings. His business dried up completely. The $500 he stole from me, it cost him his entire business and reputation in the industry. I had been looking for a summer job to save up for college and help my single mom with bills. After weeks of searching, I finally landed a position at a local store. It wasn't anything fancy, just working as a cashier and monitoring the self-checkout area. The pay was decent, and the morning shifts meant I could still enjoy my summer afternoons. The store wasn't usually busy, especially during morning hours. Most days, management would have me watch over the 4 self-checkout lanes instead of opening a regular register. Some customers would grumble about it, but most understood. That is, until I met her. I was about an hour and a half into my shift, helping an elderly woman figure out how to scan her items. My co-worker was due to clock in soon. She usually spent a few minutes chatting with our manager behind the guest service desk first. Our manager was one of the coolest people you could work for, always having our backs and treating us like actual humans instead of just employees. That's when it started. The entitled woman tried to get my attention, her tone already dripping with irritation. I politely told her I'd be with her in a moment, as I was still helping someone else. Before I could even finish with the elderly customer, the entitled woman practically sprinted toward me and demanded my attention even louder. When I asked how I could help, she demanded that I get a cashier to the regular registers. I explained that our cashier would be arriving soon. She then insisted that I would have to take her to a register and check her out myself. I tried to explain that I couldn't do that, but she cut me off, rudely pointing out that I had legs and could walk. When I explained that I had to stay in my designated work area, she started spouting that tired old line about the customer always being right, asking if they hadn't taught me that. I tried to explain again, but before I could finish, she grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward the registers, lecturing me about how she was going to teach young people how to be proper cashiers. I resisted, telling her to let go while explaining that I knew how to do my job. My manager and coworker must have heard the commotion because they came out from behind the customer service wall. The entitled woman immediately started yelling for the manager. When my manager approached quickly but professionally and asked how they could help, I tried to explain the situation. The woman immediately shut me down, screaming at me not to speak and calling me a child. After my manager asked her to calm down, she launched into a completely fabricated version of events, claiming that I had refused to let her buy items, assaulted her, and told her to get lost. She then demanded that I open a register while also accusing me of inappropriate touching. My manager, clearly seeing through her lies, directed me to go to the front desk area. When the manager mentioned getting a backup cashier, the entitled woman declared she wanted to press charges. That's when our security officer walked in, and instead of calling for backup, my manager had them remove the woman for assaulting me. When she was being escorted out, she hurled insults at everyone. My manager came over afterward, jokingly telling me to stop assaulting customers and get back to work, barely containing their laughter. Outside, the entitled woman had a complete meltdown. She screamed threats about knowing where I lived and how I was a dead kid. The security officer took her to the office where they called the police. When they asked if I wanted to press charges, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The store's security cameras caught everything. She ended up getting charged with assault of a minor and attempted kidnapping since she tried to forcibly move me from my work area. She got community service, a hefty fine, and a lifetime ban from all store locations in our state. I heard she tried to appeal the ban, claiming she was having a bad day, but the corporate office stood his ground. I still work at the store part-time during school breaks. Whenever new employees start, they use the security footage and training as an example of how not to let customers treat you. My manager even got a commendation from corporate for handling the situation so well. I've been working at my family's restaurant since I was old enough to carry plates. My parents immigrated here 20 years ago and opened this small Chinese restaurant with their life savings. It wasn't much, but through hard work and dedication, we built it into something special. I practically grew up in the kitchen, learning every recipe and technique from my mother while my father handled the business side. When my parents decided to take their first vacation in 15 years to visit relatives back home, they left me in charge. At 25, I'd already been managing most of the day-to-day operations anyway, so it seemed natural. Little did I know this would lead to one of the most infuriating encounters I've ever had with an entitled customer. It was a busy Friday evening and we were short-staffed because one of our servers had called in sick. I was helping out in both the kitchen and the dining room trying to keep everything running smoothly. That's when she walked in, a woman I'll call Karen, accompanied by what appeared to be her book club friends. When I greeted them asking how many they needed a table for, Karen immediately demanded a table for 8, adding that they needed to be quick because they had a book club meeting in 2 hours. I could already tell from her tone that this wouldn't be pleasant, but I put on my best professional smile and led them to our largest table. Karen immediately complained that the table was too close to the kitchen and demanded something more private. When I explained this was our only table that could accommodate 8 people, she insisted we push smaller tables together. I had to explain that we were too busy for that arrangement as it would block the path for our servers. She huffed but finally sat down. After I handed out menus, Karen ordered house wine for everyone, making sure to demand that the glasses be properly full, throwing in a snide comment about half pours at other establishments. As I walked away, I could hear her loudly complaining to her friends about the terrible service. Things really started going downhill when I took their food orders. Karen wanted General Tso's chicken, but with an impossible list of modifications. Brown sauce instead of red sauce, white meat only, extra crispy, but not too spicy. When I explained that we couldn't modify our traditional recipe to that extent, she got indignant, invoking the customer is always right philosophy and claiming other Chinese restaurants always accommodated her requests. The situation escalated when I explained this was my family's recipe, and we prepare it traditionally. She demanded to speak to the manager, and when I told her that I was both the manager and the owner's daughter, she thought this meant I could definitely accommodate her demands. She became increasingly aggressive when I stood my ground, threatening to ruin us with her food blog and ensure everyone knew how terrible our place was. By this point, other customers were starting to stare. Her friends looked embarrassed, but Karen was just getting started. She bragged about having over 500 followers and the business she brought to restaurants with her blog. In her dramatic display of anger, she stood up and knocked over her wine glass, spilling red wine all over the white tablecloth and onto the floor. Then she had the audacity to blame me and demand I pay for her dry cleaning. That's when I'd had enough. I looked up her supposed food blog, which wasn't hard to find since she'd been waving her business card around. When I pointed out that she actually had only 127 followers and hadn't posted in 6 months, giving her the choice to either order from our menu as written or leave, she exploded with accusations of harassment. Her friends had already started gathering their things, clearly mortified, with one of them suggesting they go somewhere else. Karen announced she'd be contacting her lawyer about the harassment before storming out. One kind friend stayed behind long enough to slip me a $20 bill for the spilled wine, quietly apologizing before hurrying after the others. The next day, we got a 1-star review on every platform possible, claiming we had discriminated against her and served raw food, even though they never actually ordered anything. Her friends came back the next week without her, ordered a feast, tipped generously, and became regular customers. They told me Karen had been banned from their book club for her behavior, and they'd been looking for an excuse to kick her out anyway. One of her friends turned out to be a real food blogger with an actual following, and she wrote a glowing review about our restaurant's commitment to authentic Chinese cuisine and tradition. Our business actually increased after the whole incident. My parents got a good laugh out of the story when they returned from their vacation. My mother just smiled and said I had done a good job protecting our family recipes. It felt like I'd passed some sort of test I didn't know I was taking. Now whenever we get difficult customers, which is rare, we just call it pulling a Karen and laugh it off. It was a hectic Saturday morning and my husband and I had decided to treat ourselves to some coffee after spending the entire morning helping at the local animal shelter. We volunteer there every weekend and that day had been especially draining as we'd helped process a large intake of rescued pets. We were both exhausted and desperately needed caffeine. We placed our mobile order at our usual coffee shop, knowing there was a parade happening downtown. We figured ordering ahead would save us some time, but when we arrived, the line was stretching out the door. People were packed inside like sardines, many wearing event t-shirts and carrying parade merchandise. I noticed right away that there were only two employees behind the counter, one taking orders and another making drinks. They both looked overwhelmed, moving as fast as they could while maintaining their composure. The young barista making drinks had a slight tremor in her hands, likely from stress and the constant movement. That's when she walked in. This woman, probably in her 50s, strutted through the door wearing an outfit that looked like she'd raided her teenage daughter's closet. Tight leggings, knee-high boots, and a puffy vest that made her look like she was going skiing. She walked straight to the mobile order pickup area, completely ignoring the sea of waiting customers. Her phone was already in hand. Screen bright was the coffee shop's app when she started waving it around like a beacon. She immediately started yelling at the barista, demanding to know where her drinks were since she'd ordered them 22 minutes ago. The overwhelmed barista barely had time to look up from her work and asked for the name on the order. The woman responded by shoving her phone forward and rattling off her complex order: a venti caramel mocha frappuccino with extra shots and whipped cream, a grande vanilla latte with almond milk and extra foam, and an iced Americano with 7 pumps of caramel. She complained about how unacceptable the wait was, emphasizing that it was only 3 drinks. The barista tried to apologize and explain that they had a lot of orders, but the woman cut her off, continuing to berate her about the wait time and questioning their ability to do their jobs. The barista's hands were shaking even more now as she turned to search for the drinks. I looked at my husband and he gave me that knowing look, the one that said he knew I wasn't going to stay quiet. After years of working in customer service myself, I couldn't stand watching entitled people berate service workers. I interrupted the woman's tirade, pointing out the obvious line going out the door and the fact that only 2 people were working their hardest to serve everyone. I told her bluntly that her attitude wasn't making the drinks appear any faster and was only making her look like a terrible person. The woman turned to me, her mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. Her perfectly manicured hands clutched her purse tighter. She started to sputter about how dare I speak to her that way and began to ask if I knew who she was, but I cut her off. I told her plainly that I didn't know who she was and didn't care. What I did know was that these workers deserved basic respect, especially when they were clearly doing their best in a difficult situation. The barista returned with 2 of her drinks, quietly informing her that the 3rd one would be ready in just a moment. The woman announced she would put these in her car, all while glaring at me and muttering that this wasn't over. When she came back for her 3rd drink, she tried to stare me down, but I just smiled and waved. Her face turned red as she snatched her final drink and stormed out, nearly colliding with another customer in her haste to leave. After she left, the barista brought our drinks over and thanked me profusely for standing up for them. I assured her that it was necessary, explaining that nobody deserves to be treated that way, especially not while working so hard. When we were leaving with our drinks, I noticed Karen still sitting in her car, furiously typing on her phone, probably writing a scathing review or social media post about her horrible experience. But the look on her face when someone had finally stood up to her was worth more than any amount of coffee. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.